I'm Chris Albanese, former Secret Service agent, author, and co-host of the Crew Reviews podcast, where I've been fortunate enough to interview some of the world's greatest storytellers. In doing that, I've come to find that a lot of the authors who write in the spy, mystery, and thriller genre have actually walked the walk so they can talk the talk. But every now and then I meet an author who doesn't have that background, yet still writes like they've spent a lifetime working crime scenes or running intel ops for a three-letter agency. And one of those authors, Matt Scott, the author of Surviving the Lion's Den, is the next guest on Author Spotlight. But before we hear from Matt, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button down below and turn on notifications so you'll never miss an episode. And then tap the thumbs up. Thanks. Matt Scott, welcome to Author Spotlight. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a great pleasure, man.
Hey, so we're here. We're going to talk about you. We're going to talk about Surviving the Lion's Den, which was your debut. Fantastic book. And I see we'll talk about it later, but I see there's another poster behind you of another book. But let's, for people who may not know who you are, may not have interacted with you on social media, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to become a writer?
All right, I'll try and keep it as short as I can because it's a little bit of a long story. But growing up, I hated reading just simply because of all of the assigned classic books that we had to read in high school and college. So I just didn't. It just wasn't for me. But then the Da Vinci Code phenomenon happened, and I read all of Dan Brown, and this. To this day, I was on the elevator at work, and I've never seen this guy again in my life. But we were talking about spy novels, and he said, "You have to check out Vince Flynn." I was like, "Okay." So went to Books A Million, got I think it was Act of Treason.
Okay, yeah.
Read it in 2 days, and then then I was hooked. So I read all of Vince's books, read all of Brad's books, Brad Thor, and then I just kind of acquired the taste for it. Now I've always been a nonfiction fan, so it was always kind of good right after 9/11 to see at least from the perspective of the literary perspective of people who were writing books about what happened. Mm-hmm. So I kind of was able to combine my knowledge from that with the love that I had for the fictional titles. And I've always tended to kind of absorb things. I don't know why. Just when I see something visually or read it, I can just pick it up. But I went to go see David Baldacci in November of 2018, I think. And it was my turn to get my book signed. And it's like, I was 39 at the time. He's 42 old to write your first novel. I kid you not. This dude stops mid-signature, looks up at me like this and says, "Hell no." So, at that point, I had no excuses. I had no reason not to. I mean, this legendary man of the industry was telling me that I could, there's no reason for me not to do it. And B, he thought, 40 was still a young man. So,
that's definite. I mean, you have to have a little bit of life experience in order to write the books that we enjoy. It's actually the exception and not the rule that someone in their 20s or 30s will actually be a standout star in writing in writing thrillers or just writing fiction in particular. But yeah, you had to get some of that real world experience. So David Baldacci was completely right about that. Yeah,
and it just, I think I just finished reading Fred Burton's book about the CIA agent that got captured in Beirut.
Yeah, Beirut Rules.
Beirut Rules, yeah, that's what it was. So I just finished reading that, and I came home and I started, plotting it out and thinking of characters, and I had the first draft done within 7 months, I think.
Yeah, good stuff.
And
great.
It was just one of those things that it felt so natural, felt pure, and I didn't hold back. So I was like, what have I got to lose? What am I going to be? The worst thing that's going to happen is that I'm going to still be in the supply chain industry for another 20 years.
So you mentioned, you write thriller, political thriller, military type thriller, CIA type stuff. And you mentioned that you like to read Vince Flynn and Brad Thor and Fred Burton. Is there any other genre that you're into that you read?
my guilty pleasure is the horror stuff. Yeah, so it kind of it's one of those things that allows me to take a break from time to time when I get too kind of overwhelmed with the government aspects of everything. So
that happens, of course.
Yeah, and it's kind of my guilty pleasure. I read one book I read was Kill Creek by Scott Miller. It's about a group of horror authors that go to stay in a haunted house and something happens and they actually have to come back to it. So horror is probably my guilty pleasure, but I'll take a break from time to time and read some crime.
Yeah. Well, you definitely need to do that to recharge the batteries. My guilty pleasure, it's not guilty pleasure, but I love and I enjoy reading fantasy. In fact, if you were to like pan that way, it's all fantasy novels. And so when after I've got my fix of the thriller, crime, mystery, and it just it helps with writing, reading different genres and stuff. But speaking of writing, is writing your full-time job? You mentioned something about logistics earlier. So I'm wondering, if writing's not your full-time job, what do you do for a living?
My 8 to 5 is I am a financial analyst for a supply chain supplier. So I don't know if you remember, a few years ago we had the problem with the Somali pirates, and they made the movie with Tom Hanks.
Right.
That company, I can't say their name for legal purposes, but that's the company that I work for. And I used to work in Virginia Beach for another shipping company. The company that I now work for acquired them, and I moved from Virginia Beach down to Charlotte, North Carolina in 2006. And I've bounced around that company since then, really. So I still do the supply chain logistics thing. And believe it or not, as crazy as this sounds, working on standard operating procedures, SOPs, and the Green Belt certification that I received allows me to look at things from a end-to-end process. And that was really helpful when I tried to put the novel together, because I'm not quite the pantser that Brad Thor is. He says that, he just sits down and does it. I'm a little bit of a hybrid. I have to have a direction to go a little bit, so go north. But because I need to know what it looks like at the beginning, what it's going to look like in the end, and kind of what to put in between, how to fill the gaps. The corporate world really helped me with my writing, I think.
Do you think if you could retire tomorrow and write full time, would you do it?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, no question. I mean, my mind is so, I don't want to sound too egotistical, but I have a very imaginative mind. Everybody, when they have a bad conversation with somebody, thinks about, the way they wish that conversation would go. My mind is pretty bad about that. But the good part about it is it really makes you write good dialogue and have really bad villains. I mean, Vince Flynn was the best about it. He just made you want to just crush the villains in his novel. And it just was felt like a release when Mitch Rapp finally did it. But I just, that's the way I think of things. And it just, sometimes it's good on the brain, sometimes it's bad, but from a writing perspective, it's a lot of fun.
So, writing books and your book, Surviving the Lion's Den, right here. There are a lot of points of view in the storyline that all come together really well.
Thank you.
But what sparked the idea for this story, for this project?
Okay, so it was after reading Beirut Rules, I did want to do a novel about a kidnapped CIA agent, and that had been in my mind for a while. But Beirut Rules kind of like was the divine intervention type thing. Just says, okay, you need to do this. That's how I'm looking at it anyway. But I've always been I've always been interested, with Iran, and how people from the West, especially the United States, don't know what goes on inside there, and how the impact of the coup in '53, and how the chain of events that just made the dominoes fall. So I watched a couple of really good documentaries on Iran on Amazon Prime. So I just kind of got the idea of, let's take the readers on a tour of Iran and let's kind of let them see how things operate in there. And then we got the plot with the CIA agent, and I needed a character that had no real military or government background to take people on that tour. So you really see Iran mostly through Kirk's eyes.
Yeah, Kirk's eyes,
yeah. There's other points of view, as well, but I needed somebody like that to take the people on the tour of Iran, because the Da Vinci Code really impacted me like that. Because when Robert Langdon was going all these other places, Dan Brown was taking you on a tour of Europe, basically. And that always, I just kind of like that. I was like, well, let's do something like that with Iran, because people don't know how it operates. It's easy to say that it is, just operated by the Ayatollah with an iron fist. All these people are evil. Maybe from the perspective of the Ayatollah government, sure. But, from the perspective of the people who are living there and, living under that iron fist, it's not the case. And I wanted people to see that, because I really believe that at some point, Iran is going to break out of this. I don't know when. I think it's coming more sooner than later, simply because technology is advancing, for social media. And, the people of Iran, they want their iPhones, they want their internet access. And you can only keep people down for so long. And I think, it'll happen. Will it happen in my lifetime? I think so, but you never know. But the idea for Surviving the Lion's Den was to take people on the tour. Let's see what Iran's like, and let's try and get a CIA agent out of there.
What was interesting, knowing that your background was in logistics, like I wouldn't have known, like I didn't know prior that your background was logistics. I would have thought you had an intelligence background, with how detailed you got in painting the picture of what Iran looked like. So you did some really good research on this. And so you mentioned one of the characters, Kirk Carruthers.
Yeah.
You also have Tom Delaney, and you have some other characters in that story.
Uh-huh.
I'm curious though, did you model any of those characters on real people, like friends or family? And if you did, did you tell them that you did?
None of the main characters. No. Kirk Carruthers. I'm a Florida State fan, so Kirk Carruthers was actually a tight end in Florida State back in the 90s.
That's too funny.
I changed the spelling a little bit. I took a lesson from Stan Lee on that one, using the double consonant. Tom DeLange, I wish I could give you a good answer. That name just kind of popped in my head.
Okay.
But there are a couple other characters in there that very minor that are some friends of mine, and I did tell them about.
Did you tell them?
Yeah, I told them. Yeah.
Then, do any of them die, and you tell them that they're dying?
No.
Are they bad guys?
No.
And you tell them that they're a bad guy?
No. No, nothing like that. But if I run into somebody in the corporate world that I really don't like that much, trust me, I will make them a villain, and they will die. But otherwise, you had some.
It's a great thing about being an author, by the way.
Oh yeah, it's totally therapeutic. Therapeutic.
Right.
So now, just the small characters here and there, I'll throw in. But I don't have it in me to try and kill off people that have been really good to me.
All right. Well, I know you love writing, and I love writing as well. I mean, we wouldn't be a writer if you didn't love actually doing it.
Yeah.
But for you, what is the most satisfying part of writing?
Sitting down, and when you sit down to write a chapter, and you know what you have to do, but you have no idea how you're going to work something out.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, just the juices are flowing, and the idea just comes in your head, and like, you kind of surprise yourself, right? And they're like, oh man, that was good. And because that to me is the signal of, I'm supposed to be doing this.
Right.
That's where it feels, or very organic to me. And I kind of stress out a little bit when I do my original outline, because I'll outline maybe 2/3 of the book. I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to get the rest of it? And then it just kind of starts flowing. But, when I surprise myself, that's when I get up and I finish the chapter, I'll go downstairs and I'll take a celebratory shot of Jack Daniels, because that's when I know I did it right.
That's awesome. All right, so here's the inverse. Excuse me. Here's the inverse. What's the most unsatisfying part of writing?
The writing process itself, or
just in general. Yeah, take the whole thing.
Oh Lord. Well, learning the business of the publishing business has been difficult for me to navigate, just because I'm so green. If there was something that I wish would change, it's that I wish that there were more agents out there, like outside the New York area. I was very lucky. I got an agent out of Chicago, but when you're doing the querying process, it's all in the New York area.
Yeah, just about. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they all stay in the same circles, and I'm not saying it's totally bad, but I think it doesn't leave a whole lot of room for somebody who likes to write thrillers, and you get a group of agents that they get they usually do thrillers, but then they get tired of it, and maybe you just hit them at the wrong time. If that part of it was a little bit more diverse through the country, I think the thriller industry especially would really break out, kind of in a way that it did in the golden years, right after 9/11. You don't want to profit on 9/11, and I'm not saying that, but when Vince came along and Brad Thor came along, they all came along in the early 2000s. So it was really a golden age for political thrillers, and now it's kind of died down a little bit. And I think if there was more there were more agents and publishers outside of New York, not such a monopoly on that, I think it would make it easier for a lot of other writers to break into the industry.
Yeah, well, the big publishing companies keep whittling down. Pretty soon, there's only going to be one.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I never thought I'd see Simon & Schuster get bought. I mean, but that's the way it goes. And in the end, the world we live in is the world we live in. So you just gotta stick to it and never quit. Believe in your dream and just keep going after it. I mean, I got 96 rejections from agents before I was lucky enough to get mine.
Yeah, you have to have thick skin being an author, because you get rejected when you're querying for an agent, and then when you're trying to get your book sold to a publisher and an editor. So you have to be able to handle those rejections. But let's go back to storytelling.
Okay.
So I'm gonna name off a couple different things, and I want you to tell me which you think is the most important aspect of storytelling. Okay. So we got character, plot, setting, pace, theme, or tone. So those 6 things. Which of those do you think is the most important aspect of storytelling, and why?
I'm gonna go with characters, because to me, if you write strong characters, no matter what plot you have, it's going to work out pretty good. But you have to be able to write a good outline, a good character outline, and make the characters lovable. I mean, if you think about Vince Flynn's novels, his plots were never really overly complex. I mean, you didn't have the Tom Clancy stuff or Mission Impossible stuff where multiple things were going on at the same time. His plots were, I don't want to call them simple, but they're very linear. But he had characters that you just loved, and it made you go back to buying the book. So I'm going to go with characters.
Yeah, characters that you love, or characters that you love to hate.
Absolutely.
So if you're pulling that emotion from the reader, you're doing it right.
Exactly.
You've done it right with several of your characters in the story.
Thank you.
All right. So no matter the level of an author's success, all at one point or another, and I've talked to New York Times bestsellers on the Crew Reviews podcast, to debut authors who are just coming out like yourself, they all have this feeling of an imposter syndrome. Like, yeah, I may have written a book, but I'm not really an author, or they're going to find out on this book that I'm a fraud. One, have you ever felt like that now that you have a published book out there? Have you ever felt like that? And why do you think that authors in general all feel that at some point?
Um, for me personally, I do feel that I'm an author, but because I'm not doing it full time, it's still my passion, but it's not my job. And so that's kind of where my insecurity is I want to be able to garner the success of somebody like Mark Greaney or Jack Carr or somebody like that. So that's kind of where my security is. But it is kind of fun for me these days when people ask me what I do, and I can tell them that I'm an author.
Well, let me ask you, do you tell them, if you meet someone like at the grocery store, not a bookstore, but like somewhere outside, and you're talking and they ask what you do for a living, do you tell them you're in logistics for whatever company, or do you tell them, no, I'm a writer, and
I tell them I'm a writer.
You do, right?
I'm telling them I'm a writer. Yeah, got to sell, man. Got to sell. My wife and I were just on we just took a trip to Maui, and
Right.
there was a lady sitting next to us that was just reading on her iPad, and I just kind of hit her up and asked her what she was reading. She's like, yeah, I'm an avid reader, read everything. And the conversation just kind of took hold, and she reads political spy thrillers. So maybe I sold another one, but
Yeah.
you got to hustle. I mean, it's logistics has been a good business for me. It's enabled me to have the kind of life that I have.
Right.
I'm very thankful for it, but the writing is the passion. And as long as I can have the ability to tell somebody that I'm a writer, I'm going to do that.
I know that feeling. Definitely know that feeling.
Yeah, and as far as why authors in general feel insecure or have that imposter syndrome, my take on it is that all of us, or in order to be a really good author, you have to have a very good sense of, you have to be very sensitive. And I think that comes from the aspect of you have to always put yourself in another person's shoes, and in our case, the character's shoes.
Right.
So it makes it valuable for us to be able to write. But when it comes to, real life, life outside the computer screen, when something goes wrong and, we automatically try and see that person's point of view. And that can, it makes it difficult, I think, to kind of separate or, harden yourself to, to some of the aspects of life. And that's where kind of self-doubt comes in, because a lot of us, want to see things work out because we have, a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Right.
And, you always have to try and have a good ending. So that's my take on it.
No, I like it. That's a good take. The fact that we put ourselves in our character shoes, you have to be sensitive, and we're so, as authors, we're so used to rejection.
That's true.
You just expect it. You have something else coming out, I think, pretty soon, right? It's right over your left shoulder there, the Iranian Deception.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it is a sequel to The Surviving the Lion's Den. It has a lot of the same characters. It comes out June 13th. Started getting some of the swag in. I got my
nice
service cup there. I'm getting some koozies in and all that stuff. But this one is I took a little bit of a different I won't say point of view, but I went down a different road on this one. So in Lion's Den, the main character was Kirk Carruthers, and you had Tom DeLange because the plot couldn't exist without him. But I planted another character named Ben Thrasher in there, and I decided to go the route of making Ben Thrasher the main character because there was just something about him that I liked, that he was so guilt-ridden over his failure in his first mission that I thought it was a good way to kind of springboard into having him with his own novel. Kurt's journey, I kind of felt like more or less kind of came to a close because he went to Iran for his grandfather and to resolve that area of his life. Could I have gone further with Kirk? Yes, I could. But I wanted to have somebody in the CIA, be my flagship character going forward. You still see Kirk, you still see Tom DeLange, you still see Beth Jenkins, you still see Farad. But the the hook on the book is the supreme leader of Iran has died, and in 3 hours, the Council of Experts has named the replacement. It is a character from Surviving the Lion's Den that you will recognize. I took that character to a whole new level, gave him a disease that not many people have, but he also has a secret. He wants to dominate the Middle East using some secrets that he kept from the Nazis. So I just thought, let's just take. I mean, if you could take two of the most evil governments in the modern era, right? Iran and the Nazis are gonna rank up there. So I wanted to try and figure something out to do that, and I think the people, the readers, are really gonna like what I came up with. I don't want to give away too much, but
yeah, don't. We want people to go out and buy the book. It sounds extremely interesting. Matt, where can people find you? You got a website? You on social media? Let us know.
Yeah, my website is mattscottbooks.com. I post a lot of blogs, and you can see some of the videos and pictures that I post from some of my signings. You can contact me there. The email address goes directly to my email, but you can also contact me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. I'm more active on Facebook or Instagram. Twitter it's just not my favorite medium, right. But people can contact me there. My handle for both Twitter and Instagram is @MattScottBooks, and you can just find me on Facebook and friend me. I don't have a business account. I do it personally.
And I'll make sure all those will be up on the screen as you were talking. They'll be popping up. Matt, thanks so much for coming on Author Spotlight.
Thank you, Chris.
Out right now is Surviving the Lion's Den, and coming out soon in a couple weeks. You said June 13th, right?
June 13th.
June 13th, The Iranian Deception. Matt Scott, thanks again, and I will see you on social media.
I'll see you there, Chris. Thank you so much for having me.
You got it.